Good evening, everybody. A warm welcome to our panel discussion tonight, now I'm making the same mistake, Speculative Ecologies and Contemporary Art. I'm very happy to welcome you online, my colleagues from the Zentralinstitut für Kunstgeschichte in Munich, my dear colleagues at the LMU in Munich, but also my colleagues and the students here at the University of the Arts in Braunschweig, where I'm now based. So it's the first time that we are organizing a hybrid format and bringing this three institutions together in our discussion series. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, and also a big thank you for the guests. Pina Yoldash from San Diego, Caroline Jones from the MIT in Boston, and Aneduki Jordan from Berlin, Karlsruhe. I'm very happy, together with Julian Stalter, to be able to host you tonight and to have a discussion about speculative ecologies in art. So due to our tight time schedule, I just start right now with the introduction. Please let me know if you can't hear me properly. In the arts, artificial ecosystems and speculative concepts of nature offer the possibility of imagining and visualizing new planetary worlds. This includes utopian visions of alternative orders and fluid classifications, as well as hybrid, unusual weavings, interweavings of nature and technology. Speculative Ecologies in Contemporary Art, the title of today's panel discussion, is considered here as an artistic strategy that develops speculative drafts of potential future worlds with hybrid life forms, new forms of conviviality, so living together, and also new forms of species. Using technologies such as artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and 3D printing, artists conceive utopian, resolution-oriented, action-based, and performative works. According to Rosalind Dyprose, who writes about speculative research, speculation is futural. It keeps open past and present worlds to potentiality, possibility, and the unknown. A well-known example is Donna Haraway's fable, The Camille Stories, Children of the Compost from 2016, which shows that eco-fictional narratives can grant solace and relief. The protagonists in this speculative fabulation, as she calls it, have so-called sims that underline the relationship between humankind, especially children, and more than human beings. Camille, one of the children, is given several genes from the monarch butterfly, resulting in orange and black patterned skin and butterfly feelers. So storytelling as such allows speculating about fluid body boundaries and species spanning forms of relatedness. Haraway speaks from kinship, serving as a counter model to the dystopic Anthropocene discourse in favor of positive, hopeful, but also playful narratives through eco-fiction strategies. In eco-fiction, artistic representation stands in a tense relationship to the relevant reality between documentation, simulation or imitation, and fiction, and also concerns liminal states, the imaginary. Comparable to speculation and fabulation, speculative ecologies provide us with an artistic instrument for sketching alternative worlds with an intersectional perspective. Worlds made up of, I quote, counter-hegemonic practices, aesthetics, poetry, and theories in order to retell the present in the here and now, as Naomi Gramlich explains in her article about feminist speculation. She describes speculation as linguistic material assemblage with, through, and in bodies. Opposed to the immediacy and promise of authenticity of real nature or living ecologies, the artistic, fabulated imaginary worlds might lead to an overlapping of different realities and broaden the perspective on our present. I hand now over to my colleague Julian Stalter.
Thank you, Ursula Ströbele. Also, good evening from my side. Creating speculative ecologies presupposes a certain perspective or understanding of these living systems from their creator. How would one build such an artificial ecology? In the age of technoscience, where biology and digital technologies increasingly blend together, this has been explored in several ways. For example, in the laboratory with research on genetics. These endeavors have been closely accompanied by artistic approaches in bioart. When in the year 2000, the DNA was wholly decrypted, bioartist Joe Davis said that now life has become open source and available to anyone. Of course, this is a highly debatable argument, but it highlights the supposed analogies between genetic code and software code, which many bioartists emphasized at that time and suggest that the living world is there for us to reprogram and edit according to our imaginations. But the big question remains if an ecological system really can sustain when injected, for example, with genetically modified organisms. Another perspective, which focused more on emergent biological phenomena and evolution, was research on artificial life. Approaches in synthetic biology and simulation were done by building silicon second natures to create nature in computer systems. Evolutionary algorithms and emergent properties promise to recreate biological phenomena in the computer, starting from first principles. And this was also closely accompanied by artificial life art, with artists simulating cyber natures that are inhabited by artificial creatures. Jane Prophet, for example, built a digital space called Technosphere, which was, in her own word, a sublime ecology that would either drift into stasis or lead to fluctuations in the simulated environment. But of course, also without the intervention of techno-scientific research methods, the active and ongoing nature changes and adapts constantly to its surrounding. In opposition to a finished creation that remains unchanged after its initial inception, these active processes in nature are creating and changing symbiotic ecosystems, marking the debris of the Anthropocene not as an end, but as another episode to which they adapt. So these scenarios provide plenty of opportunities for artists to think ahead and imagine speculative ecologies. They can draft alternative futures by turning away from dominant narratives and dystopian scenarios towards interconnected symbiotic ecologies conceived in artistic practice and thought. So for this panel today, we invited 3 speakers to approach these topics from different perspectives and maybe from different methodologies. Caroline Jones is an art historian, and Pina Yoldash and Anne Duki-Jordan are practicing artists. We hope to engage in a lively dialogue this evening and maybe imagining together one or even several speculative ecologies. So we are very much looking forward to this discussion. And before we start with the presentations, a short notice. First, we will hear all 3 presentations. And after this, we will go into a discussion with the possibility to ask questions. So all the viewers can either post their questions in the chat or raise their hands and formulate them directly. And this panel will also be recorded. So Ursula, we start with the first introduction.
Caroline A. Jones is an art historian specializing in modern and contemporary art with a focus on its technological production, distribution, and reception, as well as the art-science interface. She's currently researching the anthropogenic image of environmental disaster with an emphasis on political contestation and occlusion. Jones is a professor in the History, Theory, and Criticism section at the Department of Architecture, as well as Associate Dean for Strategic Initiative at the MIT in Boston, so the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Thank you for being with us. Caroline, the stage is yours.
I just took over from your screen sharing. I hope that's okay. And trying to start the presentation. It looks a little squashed from my end, but hopefully the folks online hopefully can see it. In any case, it's an honor to be part of this conversation, and I look very much forward to see what my colleagues, artists, are coming up with these days in our urgent times. So we are not the only creatures on Earth. Ecologies refers to this domus or oikos, in which symbiosis or with living is the governing condition. From the cell to the planet, symbiosis is that which is. It has driven speciation over the 3.7 billion Earth years in which life has been detected in our regolith. And I argue that we need to take up this epistemological position, even for our speculative ecologies. Symbiontics is the polemic I've generated to capture this epistemic transformation, the ontic being that which is. So symbiosis is that which is. There's no emptiness here. Rather, there's a glorious proliferation of earthlings whose different cognitive acts shape the planet. Philosopher of science Peter Godfrey Smith has taken up more than human kinds of sensing to explore how this thing we like to call intelligence has evolved in many different ecological niches through different modes of sensory encounter. Just consider the octopus possessing 3 distributed brains that are tethered to a responsive cognitive system extending to tentacular arms that can each act autonomously, free from a cranium controlling their movements. Moreover, cephalopod intelligence in the giant cuttlefish allows chromatophores within the dermis to signal in separate sensory and semiotic fields on either side of a ventrally oriented body, communicating in 2 different conversations at once. But we don't need to stay with charismatic cephs to talk about signaling. Even in amoeba, symbiontics celebrates how evolutionary theory often begins with such single-cell organisms who evolved through endosymbiosis, as here in the amoeba Paulinella, who incorporates cyanobacteria to function as chromatophores in this single-cell phytoplankton. As Godfrey Smith relates, chemical and tactile sensing by archaeomicrobia like these were the first ways of knowing and acting on a planet ruled by gravity and mobilized by energy from the sun. Even now, bacteria still organize themselves to do cognitive processing in aggregated units of the very small. Take this remarkable image from Lake Huron in the United States, where sulfur eaters dominate bacterial mats during nighttime and drop down to give way to photosynthesizing purple cyanobacteria during daylight. These microbial colonies physically exchange their positions during the planet's circadian rhythms. Through kinds of intelligence gathering that is clearly not conducted by a brain, simple stochastic decision-making is shaped by chemical sensing, and cognition takes on a very different character from our own. For the famous social amoebae known as slime molds, clues from the environment trigger aggregation, sporulation, and actions of all kinds. We might say ecologies are the cognitive unit of our planet. But as theoretical biologist Lynn Margulis argued, eventually single-cell organism gained an evolutionary advantage through the ancient accident of incorporation, merging one into the other to become nucleated cells. She is the one who coined the concept and the word endosymbiosis. Evolution accelerated as a result, and here we are, enjoying the garden of what's shown up in the last 1.6 billion years. Like other skeptics refusing the reductive turn to microbiology in the 1960s, Margulis speculated a different ecology than the selfish gene. In symbiosis, she found eaters, engulfers, occupiers, partners, collaborators, and above all, co-evolvers in ecological units. What is the termite gut? She asked, without the protists that allow it to digest the planet's store of lignin. Margulis's favorite endosymbiosis was the real-time ingestion of Mixotricha by termites, a protist that enables these insects to eat wood. This is a symbiosis with a beastie that has its own symbionts, since Mixotricha herself travels with a gaggle of bacterial partners, such as spirochetic wrigglers that allow her motility in the termite's gut. Mixotricha functions as a composite of no less than 5 different kingdoms. To capture such complexities, Margulis coined another word, holobiont, hinting at the absolute complexity of life's entanglements and its contribution to our speculative ecologies. So I'm well into my 10-minute talk, and you're no doubt already reeling a bit. In the time remaining, another 4 minutes, I have 3 points to make regarding the 3.7 billion years in which life has been shaping the planet. So 1, according to Margulis, the sensing capacities of the earliest single-cell organisms became the endosymbiotic constituents of our own human sensory systems. In other words, ciliated bacteria contributed their sensing, wriggling character to our rods, cones, taste buds, ear cilia, and the like. This insight has transformed my own approach to ecology, since sensing our bacterial symbionts might actually be our bacterial endosymbionts sensing the planet through us. 2, without belaboring it further, simply know that symbiontics is my riff of choice for speculative ecologies, celebrating new forms of bioart that leave the code to revel in entanglement and reveal our utter dependency on the thriving of more than human life. 3, if I get to it, I'm going to explore in the last part of this talk how prosthetics and symbiosensing can together operate an internet of earthlings to keep these lively entanglements and our comprehension of them going. To recap, metagenomics proved that Margulis was completely right about endosymbiosis. Symbiosis itself and mergings into multicellular organisms replaced competition as the main driver of speciation. She argued that engulfment, incorporation, virions, targeting and occupying bacterial cells, all these mechanisms allowed fragments of genomes or entire creatures to fuse into new species, new chimeras subject to evolutionary pressure, like us all. This theory of serial endosymbiosis was dismissed as crazy, yet proven accurate by genomics. It gave support to the Gaia hypothesis that Margulis crafted with James Lovelock in the 1970s. But the most profound speculative ecology Margulis proposed is her wild and as yet completely unproven idea that certain kinds of archaeobacteria, like those spirochetic wrigglers propelling Mixotricha in the termite gut, became the source material for all animal sensing mechanisms. Thus, rather than enforcing an anthropocentric cranial paradigm on definitions of cognition or intelligence, Margulis's endosymbiotic theory of the human senses allows us to conceive of knowing and being through our bacterial symbionts. Perhaps via this, them as us, we can know about the world without thinking. This is how our immune brain remembers. This is how our ears oscillate with sound. And this is how our gut brain regulates mood without consciousness per se. That said, there are different scales, valences, and temporalities to our endosymbiotic affordances. We're not lichens. Pace, my friend Scott Gilbert. Symbiosis allows lichens to exist both together and apart as fungus and algal units, whereas endosymbiosis, in Margulis's argument, allowed consciousness itself to emerge. This is far from a consensus view in science, right? But I love the fact that the etymology of consciousness itself comes from the Latin conscientia, con with, and scientia knowing, which I choose to emphasize as with knowing. simply the way symbiosis works in the world. Margulis's theory of sensory consciousness articulates the argument that our own senses are endosymbiotic gifts of the wrigglers, rods, cones, cilia, taste buds. Therefore, knowing is always with knowing, as conscientia suggests. And this microbial consciousness offers a clue to the aggregated sensing I want our prosthetics to support. Because the old myth of Orpheus has dissolved into technologies of listening devices, prostheses, perhaps, for our bacterial wrigglers. A small number of artists and scientists are extending our small-scale vibrational senses, our own microbial consciousness, out into the planet, potentially constituting what Karen Backer calls the Internet of Earthlings. The dream is this: if our meat machines have allowed us to claim human exceptionalism and ignore our symbiotic condition, perhaps our prosthetic senses can re-educate us about the facts, not to mention serving as warning sentinels, banning ships and mining explosions when cetaceans are nearby. Field biologists and artists active with biological entities are already there. We're looking at a setup in Thomas Saraceno's Berlin-based studio, where the artist has developed a microscopic microphone to amplify an arachnid orchestra he can jam with. Similarly, sound artist Gianna Winderin tunes hydrophones and other listening devices to the ultrasonic clicks and peeps of underwater insects, piping them into her multi-channel sound installation, Ultrafield. As Winderin and Saraceno know, the frequencies of birds, insects, whales, bats, elephants, along with all other sonorous creatures, including yeast, have evolved to occupy highly specific acoustic niches. Yet our billions of years together have not prepared these creatures for humans' synthetic acoustic assaults. We've come to respect whale sonorities in culture. After all, Roger Payne's 1970 Whale Song album was not only a bestseller, it stopped whaling cold almost everywhere overnight. Here I'm combining a still from Wu Tsang's meditative installation of whales with a scrim from undersea photographs of coral spawning, each creature using specific wavelengths to navigate back to the areas they were born. The archaeogenealogy of sensing that fuels symbiontics obeys the central insight of Margulis. In symbiosis, a one plus another one always yields another one, a larger unit at a different scale. Yet each creature in its entangled ecology needs the acoustic space that is a proxy for their ecological niche. This kind of speculative ecology harbors animal entities with their own calls and soundings, but also vegetal aromatics, nectars, and colors, chemically emanating minerals, atmospheres, watery flows, and symbiont-rich currents. I'm essentially arguing for standing without understanding. Even bacterial pigments are part of this narrative. I have faith in artists of the bios who remind us we should certainly attempt to understand earthly equilibria, before we destroy them. Symbiontics meets extended sensing via machine prosthetics and artworks for a new ontology. Can we use the emerging Internet of Earthlings to achieve a vibrational register of our coexistence in ecologies? In this admittedly dreamy approach, we have to give up linguistic meaning for simple resonating with, tuning ourselves to the distinctive bands and frequencies from each and every species, mapping out ecosystems for neighborly coexistence. This is how symbioses become symbiontics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We directly continue. Genau.
Thank you. And we will continue with Pina Yoldaş, and there will be the opportunity for questions after the 3 short presentations. So Pina Yoldaş is an artist who works with digital technologies and biological sciences to create architectural installations, kinetic sculptures, and video focusing on themes such as post-humanism, eco-nihilism, speculative biology, and feminist technoscience. Yoldash is an associate professor at UC San Diego, and we are very much looking forward to your presentation.
Can you see and hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna time myself. I have too many slides, but I'm gonna skip through some of them. Carolyn, thank you so much for that mind-opening talk. It's I don't know, anything that I say after that will be a little, I think, maybe out of context, but I'm just going to kind of give an overview of what I'm doing. And I'm just going to skip, I titled the talk Synaptic Sculpture, because currently I have an exhibition open at San Diego, a solo exhibition, my first solo exhibition in the United States of America in San Diego. So the title is Synaptic Sculpture. And using that, I'm actually developing this concept of, you know, how art is happening in the brain. Okay, sorry, there's a little problem here. Are we back? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what I'm going to bring to this conversation about, you know, designing new organisms or like thinking through Anthropocene, etc., with the help of biotech, is the concept of the study of speculative biology. This was a concept that I devised for my dissertation at the Duke University. And it's a subset, or maybe a superset, I haven't decided yet, of speculative design. And speculative design emerged, I would say, as like an extension of critical design, which also emerged in Europe. I would say maybe Italy first. Critical design was very good, important, designing for, you know, questions and criticism rather than just pure consumerism. And from that on, you know, speculative biology was a concept that was embraced by Hollywood, where they would design dinosaurs or monsters, or, you know, there's all kinds of creatures coming from that entertainment industry. And I kind of adopted that because the organisms that I was interested in designing or thinking about weren't really for consumption. Therefore, you know, this is kind of a discipline now. It's multi-model, multi-layered, it's research-based practice. And I've been doing this at multiple levels. The organ level, I first started designing organs, and that would have been neolobium, which I have a nice picture of, Stomaximus and Plastoceptor. I'll talk about them. An organism level, where I started thinking about an organism, and then of course the ecosystem level, right? Because these new life forms should kind of happen in a context which is not what we think about usually when we think about biotech. And at the ecosystem level, I had worked on an ecosystem of excess, which I'm going to also talk about very shortly. So at the organ level, I have neolobium. This is one of the first organs that I designed, and it's an enhanced female reproductive or female sex organ, not reproductive because it's not really attached to a uterus. And it has multiple labia that enhances the touch sensation. And I remember studying touch across the body and how it's mapped, and finding out that in genitalia and fingertips, this is really dense, but it can be denser. So this was an organ level, I would say, intervention. And my idea was that making, you know, the female genitalia more visible, more, I would say, maybe, you know, different, etc., and creating a conversation around that. And this was 2007, 2008. Now, moving forward, I'm just going to skip these because I'm talking too much. I started designing, and I hope my, you know, slides are kind of showing up. I started designing other organs or other, you know, parts for organisms. And the next big one that I designed was Plastoceptor. And this was, again, after moving to the States and finding out about Pacific Trash Vortex around 2006. And I then launched the project as an ecosystem of excess. But I did start thinking at the design level. Alexa, stop. Sorry about that. Sorry, at the organ level, because I was really bothered by the fact that there is plastics, microplastics in ocean water, salt water, and we're talking 12 years now. So things have changed and more bioaccumulation have happened. And here I was really thinking about, a solution / criticism. It wasn't purely criticism. And these organs or systems or organisms, which like the Pantone birds, they all had a connection to a science essay or some research, and they all had a premise. For instance, Pantone birds acquire their very vivid colors after, ingesting corporate colors for eons, etc. And then this, at the organism level now, the Pacific balloon turtle has started, having an inflatable back after, eating TPU type plastics. So it was kind of tongue-in-cheek evolution, but I was really thinking about starting with organ level, tissue level, organ level, organism level, and moving up to the ecosystem level with these works. And these are, new versions because I keep showing this work and I keep adding to it. However, after doing this, I'm just going to go as fast as I can. After doing this kind of work and creating this speculative ecosystem that completely thrives in plastic ocean, and seeing that, the problems were still there, I expanded my horizon and I started thinking about architectural installation combined with speculative biology to communicate, certain issues. And again, my focus have always been on ecocide. And here is a piece from Venice Architecture Biennial. There are some new organs and organisms in here as well. But as a complete installation, I started from the floor by putting an ocean-centric map on the floor. This is basically showing us extraction of biomass every year at the ocean floor. And you see our studies for how to kind of design these water columns. This piece was titled Hollow Ocean 2048. And in this piece, some of the columns, I use columns because I wanted to give the idea of the depth that oceans bring to us. And I use some of the columns to talk about, plastic pollution. One column was to talk about oil extraction, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to skip these. Like red. I'm going to skip these. And we had one column in the center, and I'm going to show that while I'm playing these, which was basically at the end of a staircase, each step increased 10 years, and each step was also, it was getting harder and harder to climb. The height of the staircases changed based on water level changes. And so when you get to the top, then you would see basically some new formations, new creatures that were happening in Anthropocene. So I'm going to skip all of these now because we're not going to talk about what synapse is. I'm guessing that our audience knows what a synapse is. So I'm just going to skip all of these, and I'm going to come to the last, I would say, pieces that I worked on that are basically, I'm just going to skip, sorry about this. I didn't realize that we had 10 minutes, so I was going for 20, but this is already too much material for 20 as well. So I'm just going to maybe do this and come back. That will be faster. The last part that I want to talk about, and I'm going to sum up with that, is a piece, those two pieces are in Synaptic Sculpture, my current show, not in full. But for this current show, I also went back to another project. So working on, organ level, tissue level with human bodies, and then moving into marine life and working with these kind of bodies. I came back to the human around 2018. And I designed a group of characters called genetically modified gods. And that was, I would say kind of the ultimate anthropocentric speculative biology. And I came up with 9 characters, 3 main groups, power, talent, and time. And for this work, I wrote speculative fiction. So each of them have a story that actually tells us what's happening. And for this project, I also looked at the gene modifications that will happen in these, humans. And the idea was basically, I'm just going to focus on one character. Over time, and this has been brought to me multiple times in artist talks, etc., especially if you work with sculpture, there was always this kind of tension between the sculpture kind of finding life and walking away. This is, in antiquity, etc. And simultaneously, certain characters, certain, I would say, forces, cultural forces, shifted and morphed and found different bodies over time. So I was thinking about our biological imagination and how it's expressed in sculpture, just period. And I wanted to use sculpture again for this particular project. And I'm just going to talk about Artemis for a minute, and then it'll be, I guess, 11 minutes of me talking. I came up with characters that were born in the next decade or so. In 2018, we had the first genetically modified babies born in China. And each character in my kind of, project have an emphasis on one particular human desire. And when I say human desire, for instance, when I say fitness, of course, I'm talking about the fitness obsession in California, or, the culture that is giving rise to these kind of desires. It is desires defined by culture, right? And in this scenario, Artemis is designed by Nike, because this is a world where Olympics is now happening between nations as opposed to between corporations as opposed to nations. So Nike has its own team, Adidas has its own team, maybe, Lululemon has a team, I don't know. And I came up with Artemis as kind of an ultimate athlete. I followed Artemis with, other characters. I'm just going to wrap up here. I'm just going to come back to, I think, Artemis, and we'll end here. And her story was kind of the opener for this kind of, biotech revolution that we're in, the ultimate being editing the human. And in her story, there's, of course, twist. At some point, after winning all these competitions and gaining, collecting all those medals and having all those millions of followers, she decides to leave, and then her story unfolds. But this is a project that I'm working on. I'm making an animation on this. So I guess my entire practice embodies, speculative ecologies and speculative biology. So I'm going to stop here. One key concept moving forward for me was imperceptibility. So maybe we'll come back to talking about how, these kind of practices actually bring the plight of the non-human to our consciousnesses. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pina Jordas, for this very interesting presentation. And again, we will have the question after our final presentation, which is by Anne Duki-Jordan. And she's an artist who explores transience and transformation, inviting a shift away, and inviting a shift in perspective away from the human towards whole ecologies. She works with materials such as motorized elements, organic matter, and, for example, edible landscapes to create interactive sculptures. And Anne Duki-Jordan is a professor for digital media at HFG Karlsruhe, and we are looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm looking at my screen, what I can basically present. So I have 3 presentations basically, but I think I will go with this one, the artificial stupidity, which is like a long-term research-based field. I'm on it, and we already talked a lot about ecology and how we basically work in that field. And nowadays, I think it's very important to talk about also artificial stupidity, and not about artificial intelligence, and how this can be basically, or how this is influencing our entire entity as beings. That's why I think we should also ask ourselves, why does artificial stupidity matter? And then because of that, we can go already to Star Trek, which is like, I have to wait, see, you are in my presentation. I don't see myself. Okay. Basically Star Trek, which is already talking about the future in the 60s and then the 70s and the 80s and 90s, and they are talking about where no man has gone before, and so they are going on explorations and talking about adventures and explorations and to find new life and habits and life forms, bacteria and forms, and so on and so on. And right, I have to see. And then we have some elements of 7 of 9, who is like a cyborg. And she also talks about, like, she's like, she was like found as a young girl and got then adopted or like taken to the Star Trek Starfleet. And she was like this kind of cyborg, which was then humanized again. But before, she was like this person who like says like, my feelings are irrelevant. You are erratic, conflicted, disorganized. Every decision is debated, every action questioned, every individual entitled to their own small opinion. You lack harmony, cohesion, greatness. It will be your undoing. And
short question. If you changed your slide, we can't see it. We can still only see the artificial stupidity title slide.
I did. I see everything on mine.
No.
No?
Sometimes it helps to unshare and then share again.
Yes, that might help, because we only see the title of the presentation.
Artificial stupidity, right? Okay, wait again. You see it now?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
Yay! So much better. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
No.
7 of 9, yes?
No,
so,
we don't see it. Sorry.
No?
In
Okay.
Braunschweig, it's not. It hasn't arrived yet, so maybe
I can
it's our
see it,
internet
so it will
connection.
probably take some time, but I can see
Yeah,
it.
now here we go.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
our internet connection is not so good at the
Yeah, but
moment.
my internet connection also lags. It's like,
Yeah, it's unstable. Yeah, okay. Fingers crossed.
so anyhow, that's 7 of 9. So, and she also says like, impossible is a word that humans use far too often. Do we have this other slide? Do you see it?
I see the slide 7 of 9.
Okay, I moved forward.
Hmm?
I can see the data slide, so I think it's
Yeah,
fine.
okay.
Yeah, data.
Habika is just lagging behind.
Okay. Okay, and then data. Yeah, he's like he was made by a Korean scientist, also like on this planet Corona, actually, yes. And yeah, and he says like, we are more alike than unlike, my dear captain. I have pores, humans have pores. I have fingerprints, humans have fingerprints. My chemical nutrients are like your blood. If you prick me, do I not leak? And he's like, he's a machine who has feelings, who has emotions, basically. And so here we come to the artificial stupidity, which is like commonly used as a humorous opposite of the term artificial intelligence, often as a derogatory reference to the inability of AI technology to adequately perform its tasks. However, within the field of computer science, artificial stupidity is also used to refer to a technique of dumping down computer programs in order to deliberately introduce errors in their responses. So basically, we are not like responsible for any mistakes anymore. It's just like the software or the computers or whatever. But yes, to allow to make mistakes, to have the ambition to make the world a better place. This is why we also need artificial stupidity. And I'm fascinated by the way machines, ecology, and mankind interact. And it's also like that in my work, I interact with plants, objects, stones, and like the ecology itself. And also like the machines that I create, they become a part of this kind of living organisms on this environment. And so I probably have to shift from one presentation to the other presentation in order to understand maybe the way how I work. But I do a lot of like research defined on like climate change. So we have storm, and then in philosophy, the storm represents basically also a teapot, and then I make this kind of artificial stupidity robot, which is made as a teapot and moves and accelerates in the way how basically a storm dances around. Then here's like all this kind of different kind of storms and hurricanes, tornadoes, willies, and so on. And then you see there's a tiny image on the right. There is like the storm, but the teapot. But I would like to basically share the other one. Wait, I have to go back to share. Oops. This. You see it?
Yes.
So this is like a solo show I have at the moment in Miami at the Bass Museum, and the show is called I Will Always Weather With You, where we basically walk on the stratosphere of on clouds, and it talks all about the weather. And it's a large-scale multi-sensory installation where the first time human beings are involved in my show. Normally I look behind that part, and so I have this kind of machines like the teapot you see. Then we have the rescue chairs. We have upside down mirror clouds. We have a tornado on the back, which is surrounded by radicchio leaves. They are praising to the tornado, and radicchio leaves are basically very healthy. They help for constipation, which means like constipation of human beings, which should be somehow in a humorous way resolved. And in the ponds, we have moving clouds, which represents the data technology of the clouds. And we have like a helmet, and then we have like a Fiona, the last hurricane, which was like in the Caribbean island. And we have tumbleweeds, which are like basically food cans, and they move around very erratically on the floor. And this entire floor is basically made as a collage of the stratosphere. Yeah, so basically this is like an example how I work with the artificial stupidity, and they all have kind of a meaning and a saying in terms of like why we should also consider on our natural habits of our own natural intelligence, that we are not only like go like and use all these AI technologies what we have. So we have to also become more like symbionts with where we come from. And nature is also not like nature, what we always think about if we go to forests or to landscapes. It's mostly man-made, basically. And I think I'm done now with my 10 minutes. It goes very quick, and I will stop here. And I say thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Duki. Thank you so much, Pina and Carolyn. thank you for your presentations that showed the different perspectives, and I would say ecological questions, speculative ecologies on the level of, as we heard, tissues, genes, so in view of bioart, but also in view of storytelling, speculative fabulation, as Haraway said, creating sculptures, environments, and other works. So in order to imagine new forms of cohabitation, new forms of species, and I think, especially as you said, Carolyn, there's a really huge connection to the systems biology of the 60s and the system aesthetics, who really began to open the perspective upon the whole ecosystem, which also, as I read in your text, started with the very famous photographs of the blue marble planet in the 60s, really gaining a new perspective on our own ecology. I would be interested to discuss further with you also this term of speculation, of simulation futurities, but maybe we begin to open the discussion to our audience, and because there are a few maybe questions in the chat, but also in Braunschweig, you are able to, if you like, to join the discussion, also to ask questions in German, and we could translate. There is a microphone in our space, but also if you like to answer questions via Zoom, please feel free to comment, discuss with us. There's first a question by Hanni Geiger. Hanni, please. I hope that my internet connection works. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope you can hear me. Thank you to all of these three very inspiring presentations, which were very different and perfect, kind of implementation of theory and practice concerning these eco-critical aspects. My first question goes to Caroline Jones. So I'm interested if the concept of symbiosis or symbiotics also relates to aspects, probably yes, but maybe you didn't have the time to mention this, or specifically to aspects tied to aquatic eco-criticism, maybe even hydrocene, and concepts related to thinking with the ocean or the aquatic turn in general. And if I may pose a second question, would be to Pinar Yoldash. I would be interested, and probably you didn't have the time here either, to explain more, why did you choose, or why do you choose design actually as I would call it as a discipline which is actually a product of capitalism, of global economies? Is it important to use the presence, the visuality of these globally renowned brands to communicate what you intend to, or even to kind of deconstruct what they stand for? So I would be interested in your reflection. Thank you very much.
Well, I kind of want to give it over to Pinar, who chose her watery background, before you even framed that question. And it is striking that many of Pinar's works are submerged in the aquatic, right? And part of how they work is to have this kind of upsetting contrast between the plastic entity and this watery surround. So, gosh, I don't know where to start. I think maybe one gesture I would make is simply the tension, embrace, negotiation with the oceanic by feminism itself, right? The wariness of leaning into that as something thrown at women, you know, certainly by Freud. On the other hand, we are an ocean planet, and the oceans themselves are, you know, made in part by life, sequestering water in certain ways, root systems, you know, right? There's a whole argument about that I'm frankly ignorant about. But for me, the proposition of an internet of earthlings is very powerful because it can be emplaced under the water. And this is where we're killing, I don't know, are we killing the most there? It would be interesting to know. The mining operations are sending back photographs of hundreds of species we have no idea what they are. Octopuses with wings. I mean, these are just amazing, amazing, amazing images, right? So my larger argument is about sounding without understanding, standing without understanding, right? Don't pretend that we're actually going to wait to save things until we've decoded their little whale talk and like, oh, mommy's here, right? No, like they're there. The acoustic is a proxy for their existence. It already operates to carve out where they are, you know, so that's my kind of like urgent polemic. I think it has far less to do with the kind of watery, you know, astronemanus kind of watery thinking, and much more to do with just like the urgent tasks ahead. So I guess that's what I would say.
Thank you.
So, Hani, that's a beautiful question, but are you curious about my connection to design or why I'm using the word design? Like just to kind of understand. And
Yeah,
I want to echo exactly what Carolyn said. Like most of the work I did actually came from a sense of urgency as I was doing research. And it's been 15 years now. When I first started, I was panicking. And now 15 years passed. And, you know, I still panic. So there is that. Regarding design, I mean, there's this historical context that just happened. And I wasn't really the architect of it. I found myself as part of it because I come from architecture. I studied architecture. And I mean, we can unlock all of that, but that will have to do with my upbringing in, you know, the Middle East and Turkey, and like how it wasn't possible to study art, that kind of thing. But we don't have to go there. Now, why do I insist on, for instance, using Nike with my character Artemis? I think that's a better question. So I started thinking about these, you know, superhumans, designer babies, genetically modified gods, that's the current name, because I live in the United States, and because here there is an obsession with Marvel and DC Comics, and the entertainment industry is repetitive with that. And for the longest time I said, wouldn't it be nice if Spider-Man stopped using plastics in one of his films, for instance? Like I forgot how many times I brought this up in conferences I've been like, like asked to join, both on campus across the United States. It's very different here than Europe. And that was one reason why I thought, you know, I want those stories to be relevant. And unfortunately, and maybe this is not a neutral thing, maybe it's not a negative thing. And there's work that's been done on this. I remember at least one collective from Netherlands where they looked at the use of logos, animal forms in logos, and how, you know, brand logos, and how children can just recognize them very quickly, whereas they can't recognize the songbirds that are in their neighborhood, right? So we used to have our cognitive capacity, our affective and cognitive capacity. We used to direct it to natural beings and natural systems and figuring out what plant to avoid or what bird to watch. I don't know. I'm just making this up right now. That knowledge base has been replaced by this kind of, you know, plethora or ecosystem of products and services, especially in places like where I live, right? So as an artist and a communicator, I'm thinking, how do I integrate my stories to this? Because I didn't think that I had the option to completely, you know, like take off and do something completely different. Therefore, I'm like bringing in a corporation like Nike, which has a very, I would say, conflicted history, from sweatshops to how they resource their material, to how much they invest in research. Actually, they do invest in sustainability research in millions of dollars. So I saw a potential there to kind of like also talk about, you know, as a brand that is also considered positive, like with a lot of people. So that's where I am. I don't know if this answers your question, but
Yes.
why did speculative design happen? That's something we can discuss longer, and like why didn't it happen in London? Those kind of things, we can discuss that longer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Julian Stalter is next because our internet connection is so bad. So I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, but the picture is stuck a little bit. So
Okay.
my question would, my first question would also be to Carolyn Jones, and regarding this, the artist Thomas Saraceno, who uses the spiders or uses spider-like structures to make his artworks, and also this very interesting example of the whale songs, which you said stopped whaling within a month or days. And so it seems like that if we think about nature in terms of art, suddenly it seems for us to be much more worthy of protection in a way. So we kind of anthropomorphize nature to say whale is an artist or the whale is a singer. So we take steps in protecting it more. So my question would be if this is a good way to project our understanding of art onto nature and then protect it, or if it's also maybe to the disadvantages of some animals or organisms who don't possess this kind of artistic expression to us humans, who cannot sing like a whale or do not make beautiful structures like a spider.
I love the question. I think my effort is to craft this notion of sounding, conveying, standing without understanding, partially to honor the alterity of the more than human, right? Yeah, there's so much packed into your question. Part of this thinking came from an actual legal policy effort to see if one could make a constitution for multi-species. And I reflect on the fact that in my country, the Constitution did not include women, and it did not include African-American enslaved peoples who were eventually brokered in as 3/5 of a person, right? So the legal discourse of personhood is independent of being human. All of these entities yeah, they're human, but they don't have personhood in our legal system, right? So there is a very long history of individual countries declaring personhood for cetaceans or redwood trees or rivers in the Maori system or whatever, right? We can't do it with that alone, right? So the symbiotic thing is trying to flip the question. We are ourselves a congeries of other creatures. We have bacteria helping us sense the planet. That is our inheritance from primordial times. So like it's attempting to flip the question to get us to really, really stomp into the ground human exceptionalism once and for all. It's impossible, right? Language encodes it, we inhabit it. Practically, authorship is rewarded, blah, blah, blah. But it's really just trying to teach the kind of flips that I have been grateful to receive from indigenous epistemologies, for example, the kind of flips. So when you're born Maori, when you're born an indigenous person in Australia, you're given an animal. You don't get to choose. And you can't eat that animal, and you have to make sure other people don't eat that animal too much, right? So most of our honorific systems are built around animals. What if we could think, what if bacteria had rights? What if yeast could be unionized and protest their use in factories to produce our medicines, right? I mean, so these are all just provocations to get people to understand that so-called synthetic biology cannot create life. It can only parasitize life that is already living. So, that's my polemic.
Thank you. We have questions in the chat, I see. So the first one was from Caroline Jones. I would like to ask, or maybe you can post a question yourself.
Well, sure. I just wanted to ask Duki to talk about, because the documentation is frustrating, right? We're not there. I wanted to give you a chance to explain to us how we can walk on the stratosphere. That was such a beautiful figure. Is it merely a graphic evocation of this? Is there anything that destabilizes our proprioception that gives us the sense of walking in a layer of very thin air? Anyway, I just wanted to get you to talk about that from an experiential point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. It's like what I mostly do, which is I'm creating this huge immersive spaces where you enter and you're really entering another world. And by doing so, it's I'm thinking of like how can one basically really immerse into this kind of like feeling of like disastrous events like hurricanes or tornadoes. I mean, it's not like that unlikely you walk into a hurricane, right? So it's, and then I'm creating this infinity rooms. I thought of like, how can I make the stratosphere happening by like taking away all kind of corners and edges and really creating this kind of like trippy vision by using this distorted mirrors and really like doubling everything from upside down and making the stratosphere by doing like the meteorological images, which I made as a collage, putting it on the floor, but then it's mirrored also like in the clouds, basically the mirror clouds, and they mirror basically back into the real clouds, which are like the data clouds, what we're using as a storage. And I use this title, I Will Always Weather With You, because it's this kind of dance, because we always have to dance with our our world where we are, and we are sitting on this kind of old grumpy planet. And I was really like so fascinated by that project or this long-term research, because I'm also like a diver since like more than 20 years, and I did a lot of like research in the sea and the ocean. And you didn't see this because I was not able to present this other works which I did in the ocean, where I also like investigated all like the adaptation of the sea and what is possible, and by migrating with the air and the temperature, rising temperature, which makes basically hurricanes appear and how it travels to land. So I was really trying to make this kind of feeling approachable, but like in not as a threatening way, more in an approachable way, so that people have the chance to go and to go deeper into this topic. You know, otherwise you're scared and you run away, and it's like a different kind of approach, and it's a multi-sensory installation. This is always what I'm trying to attempt to really, deep dive into this feeling and be fully immersed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Pina Yoldash, you also had a question for Duki. Are you still muted?
Well, my question was very similar to Caroline's, but I wanted to also ask Duki, like this question. One question that I receive is, you know, if my installation, if my work was successful in conveying the message, and I wanted to see how you process that kind of question. Does that make sense? Or maybe you never receive it. Maybe I only receive this. I don't know.
In order to mean like if the approach was successful?
No, I was just wondering, like, you know, people come to me, especially when I do work on ocean plastics or more, when it's more targeted towards a problem, they would come and they would say, was this successful? And, you know, then
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, so that's why I wanted to hear how you know, process this kind of question.
yeah, I mean, it's always hard to get these questions right. I mean, it's like to ask if the egg comes from the hen or if the hen comes from the egg. We don't know. I mean, it's like when we work with this kind of like yeah, serious topics, how does one like basically like make it approachable to the audience? But I think it's a good like approach if someone comes and asks you this question, then there's already like something went on, you know, they start to think of what is it, or where does the plastic come from, or how microdosed it is, or what does endocrine disruptors do, like with every surface we touch, with every kind of we are cleaning our floors, and what it does with our body, but what it does with the yeah, whole and it's like a unique question. And I mean, it's somehow like a rattle, you know, you can go on and on and on.
I think Karen had to leave now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Because she just disappeared. So it's yeah, we have technical problems here. But I was wondering, maybe this could have been also a question to Carolyn, but also to Pina and Duki, the role of the interface. Like, if you create speculative ecologies, some of the examples you showed, there is this different kinds of interface that that have their own forms of translation and maybe also semioticization. That yeah, there is this specific instance in between which is human oriented, and that would be also in terms of sensing and perception. We've been talking about a point that interests me. But you are back, Carolyn. I see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in the midst of my workday, and decisions are being made in another meeting. But I love thinking about the interface, and I wanted to, I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about and with Thomas Saraceno. So for example, his work on the Anthropocene is precisely a way of seeing whether humans can be brought to a kind of physiological experience of, you know, spider being, or, you know, flight, or, I mean, so he has this very deep interest in interfaces that destabilize our navigational comfort, if you will. And some of these are quite terrifying. I wasn't able to do it myself, but at the Hangar Bicocca in Milano, he put up these enormous plastic membranes, and people had to venture out on these transparent surfaces and could only navigate them together. Like if you tried to move by yourself, you'd sink like a stone into this plastic trough, right? And those were proprioceptive lessons in communal sensing of an interface, of a membrane, right? So I'm very interested in that kind of work. And so for me, the interface, the more haptic, the better, the more, right, the more immersive, the better. And in this regard, again, I'm always anchoring some of my thoughts in the artworks of the 60s. So I'm interested in things like cybernetics before computers, where, I mean, you know, and Willem Flusser, our hero, our media theoretical hero, was writing reviews of some of this work, you know, very simple servo mechanisms that responded to human voice, human sound, human movement, right? These immersive technophonies where the technology was present, but it made you also very, very aware of your own human body and its affordances. Anyway, so that's one response to the very interesting question about the interface. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Are there any last question. There's no question in the chat. There's Bouquet, maybe genau, last comment. Hi, Bouquet.
Hi. Thank you. I was struck by this notion of knowing without thinking, and I wonder what it is, or is there a way to link it to tacit knowledge, which refers to a type of knowledge that includes skills, techniques, and insights that are usually acquired intuitively or through practical experience without being explicitly taught or documented. Does this make sense, or what do you think? This is a question to Caroline Jones.
It's so hard to go to my other meeting because this is so much more interesting. Yeah, the STS literature on tacit knowledge is very beautiful and interesting. I think it's based on an idea of labor and repetition. And so the artwork encounters us unprepared. That's one of its gambits, and I think it's a very precious, I think we should hold on to that. I think we shouldn't be in an antechamber rehearsing how we're going to encounter Pinar's artwork or Tukhi's artwork, right? We shouldn't be like given an apprenticeship, right? We should, in fact, be plunged into an encounter and be, in other words, this is sort of how I was answering Ursula's interesting question. We should be able to draw on what we've evolved to be and then be brought to another place altogether. And that is where the futurities are that I think are so powerful and so beautiful, right? So, you know, the people that have helped me think so much, you know, Pierre Huyghe, Thomas Saraceno, I mean, all these guys and women, right? Pipolati Rist, I mean, they come into a museum and the museum says, what's your artwork? And they say spiders, and the museum says, oh, that's a terrible idea. We don't have spider, we don't allow spiders into the museum. And Thomas says, well, I can find 50 of them right now. Just let me go and I'll collect them for you, right? So these are epistemic interventions that remind us we're always already living with, right? And then the challenge is, how do you take the very fixed scale of the human body, which is really stubborn and narcissistic and self-involved, and bridge it between, you know, these bacterial entities that actually are an immune brain, right, which is how vaccination works, and this planet, right? How do we do that trick? This is super urgent and important, and I believe in it. I'm a utopian when it comes to art's capacity to help us, you know, move away from our bad habits. So yes, tacit knowledge, but like, let's completely change it because we need better tacit knowledge, different tacit knowledge.
Thank you. I totally agree.
Maybe we have one last question in the chat, which is posted by Henry Karp for the two artists in our panel. He writes, given the accelerating crises of climate change and biodiversity loss, how can the speculative ecologies you envision through your art actively contribute to transforming post-democratic governance structures to be more effective and inclusive in addressing these urgent ecological challenges? So a question to both of you.
So Henry, hi. Are you here?
Hi,
Yeah.
I'm here, but I wasn't sure if my connection is stable enough. So, but I'm here. Hi.
Luki, if you want to go first.
If I want to go first, it's a yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a good question because like I think we all work with like thematics and materials and interfaces and computers and like mediums which are mostly not really like sustainable in a way of like how to be, yeah, like respectful towards Earth, how we basically use like our cell phones or batteries or computers. So it's a really like hard question I given myself every time, also a hard time towards that, because I'm also using this kind of mediums in order to try to talk about these issues and to like to raise more of awareness. This is why I'm also creating this dump machines, or like this artificial stupidity robots. They basically have a meaning to change the world towards the actions, but they're just like too stupid to fail, and they raise this kind of questions every time they are collecting waste, and they throwing it out, collecting waste and throwing it out. So this is something I'm doing, and I'm using also like old materials, scrap materials, so it doesn't look like this kind of super smooth and rendered machines you see quite often, and they're like industrialized. They're really like made from scrap. And yeah, this is like one way how I'm trying to work with this questions. And then regarding to my own professorship, what I'm teaching, I'm basically a professor for digital media. So I'm not trying to teach them the latest software and Unreal Machine and Touch Designer, whatever. So I'm trying to raise awareness towards ecology and how everything is basically connected together and how things related, because it's very important to understand how nature, ecology works in order to go into like the next step. And this is like what I'm trying to do.
Thank you so much, Duki. So Henry, your question says, how do you envision through your art actively contribute to transforming post-democratic governance structures? Now, first off, as an artist, I'm expected to, of all the topics that I can choose, I choose what I choose, which is ecocide and environmental degradation, anything that has to do with human, non-human interactions. But there are many other topics that a lot of other artists are working on, right? Like this is unfortunately not what everybody is working on. So first, as an artist, you establish your practice around environmentalism, which to me, it has been difficult. It hasn't been easy for me to establish my career in environmentalism, coming from where I came from. Now, next, I'm expected to show effectively and have a cultural impact, which I have very little control over, because there's an art system formed with institutions, curatorial teams, etc., etc. We have a concept of curating. So I need to be on the agenda of people who are curating, so that the work that I do that's actually focused on ecocide, environmental degradation, etc., gets into a venue so that it's in the zeitgeist, it's in the minds of some people, right? So that's also another type of work that needs to be done. On top of that, I have to make sure that the work that's being shown has cultural impact, because just installing something in a space doesn't make any cultural impact. Like you need to get press, you need to get an interview, you need to be on social media, you need to make people see that, oh, there's this work that's talking about pilot whales that are being slaughtered in Faroe Islands, for instance, right? And remind you, at this current attention economy, it's just so little chance that, you know, this kind of work will actually attract attention. Because when people put their minds on digital, they're a lot dumber, right? So we become dumber. So that's already a cascade of obstacles on the path of, you know, an artist or a cultural producer who's working with these topics. At the end of it, I now am expected to deal with post-democratic governance. They're not even democratic. They're not even going to be like, you know, having a decent, calm conversation. This is post-democracy, democracy. And today, you know, we have seen the last 6-7 months, something that's happening in front of our eyes. It hasn't been stopped, right? And here we are dealing with entities, bodies, persons that are not human. So we're very good at dehumanizing what's not part of us. There are, you know, primate origins for that. We can go on and talk about why we have in-group and out-group and how oxytocin does this and how propaganda works, blah, blah, blah. But coming to actually the subjects that need our attention and care the most, those that are going extinct as we speak. So how do I bring the work to a venue? The venue makes an impact. The culture changed. People see this and start thinking that way. And then hopefully this mobilizes people and they vote. But this is post-democracy. So you're asking an impossible question, Henry. This is an impossible question. What I proposed is in 2016, I started the governor, Kitty AI. You can vote for him when he's, you know, back online. Or this year, I'm thinking maybe I start a new Democratic Party and take the blue and make it more turquoise so that it speaks about oceans more. So this is literally where I am at, because I don't think this question you're raising can be answered via someone like me. This is a collective problem. And as a very responsible person who's been in environmental degradation for decades now, there's nothing I can do just as one person to make the non-democratic governments take action on this, right? So we need to think differently. We have to start thinking differently.
Thank you so much. Henry, would you like to add something, or otherwise you would close the...
No, I wanted to thank both of you for your honest answer. Yeah, maybe you're right. My question, I was also thinking it's a bit impossible to answer, but while listening to both of your talks, talking about your art practice and certain aspects you mentioned, raised in me the thought like there's certain intersections what post-democracy means in the and also, like, I don't know, when you were talking about your speculative, what was it again, like sports venue where not the nation states were presenting, but
Artemis, the Nike product.
Yeah, the Artemis project. So there's certain intersection here and there, but also in other.
Well, I used to think that, sorry, I'm taking maybe too long. I used to think that changing culture, being a cultural producer, doing my work properly, being a good artist, doing what I do well, would actually help change things. I'm not of that mind anymore.
It's maybe a tough conclusion, but
thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining, and also for my colleagues and students here in Braunschweig. I would also like to thank Eva Blümel from the ZI for the technical support. On our side, Burkhard Krüger, Paula Gauss, and Andre Elbeshausen, who really supported to make this possible. And thank you for coming, Pina and Duki, also Caroline. Thank you so much, and have a nice evening or a nice morning.
Thank you so much for inviting us, and thank you, Duki. So nice to meet you. Thank you, Ursula, Julia, everybody who organized and came.